In the previous video we started with how Russians like to smoke carelessly en masse. They gather at different locations and they smoke extremely carelessly, resulting in kabooming. It doesn't end there. We have another report of Russians smoking very carelessly on the Arabat Spit. You can see the location on this map. That is the outcome, of course. If I could, I would push through a campaign, an anti-smoking campaign in the Russian army so they wouldn't smoke so carelessly, because it's true, smoking truly kills if you do it carelessly. And again, as with the last attacks, in this attack a VIP was knocked out cold. His official title is too long, so I have to read it for you. A 53-year-old Russian appointed deputy head of the State Ministry of Internal Affairs for the Kherson region, Colonel of the Internal Service Sergei Alexandrovich Postovalov. This dude was knocked out cold, and you know what I mean by it. When HIMARS push all of the Russian base and logistics 50 kilometers from the front, and Storm Shadow right now has arrived to finish off those bases. They have nowhere to go, because if they go any further, they'll have to go into Russia. It was Storm Shadow that made the incredible fireworks. Storm Shadow, I would nickname it the Russian base killer or the Russian VIP eliminator. You can put that on a shirt. Imagine you're a colonel, you're in the Russian rear, 100 kilometers from the front, you're smoking worrylessly and carelessly, nothing can get to you, and suddenly, boom, it's like New Year's fireworks. You're knocked out cold by a $2 million United States dollars worth of Storm Shadow. Russia has once again used their Wunderwaffe, I'm saying it in brackets, not really a Wunderwaffe, Kinzhal missile against Ukraine. We don't know how many they shot out, but last night Ukraine shot down 6 Russian Kinzhal missiles, proving once again that they're not any kind of Wunderwaffe, but a regular cruise missile that can be shot down. And Russians must be feeling pretty horrible that their entire nuclear modernization program is based on this missile that can be shot down so easily, like anything else. Give a medal to every Ukrainian anti-air serviceman who shoots down a Kinzhal missile. The fact that Russia is using these missiles right now gives us an idea of their stocks of cruise missiles. They're not big, otherwise they would use Kaliber or Iskander, which are also incredibly expensive, but they don't even compare to Kinzhal, which is the newest, the baddest and the most expensive that Russia has. If they're using those, that tells us their stocks are low. Now let's go to the military map, and oh boy, a lot is happening right now. Yesterday I reported a tactical pause on almost all of the fronts. The situation has changed throughout the night. Offensive operations have resumed, and we'll go through all of them one by one. But first, the most outlandish reports that I got from a Russian telegram today was that Ukrainians crossed the Dnieper River with boats. They landed troops on the Russian-occupied side of the Dnieper River, and more specifically in Oleshki, the sister settlement over the river of Kherson city. Oleshki is right here, as you can see, and this Google Maps you see right here, it is outdated because after the flood, the river basin and these waterways have changed. But the thing is, as I reported in the last video, Russia ordered their most experienced units and brigades away from this front to support the Velika Novoselka axis because of Ukrainian breakthroughs, meaning they seriously weakened their front here because they're not expecting a Ukrainian attack, and I also wasn't. But what do you know, the night is dark and the Ukrainians are filled with surprises. If these Russian telegram reports are correct, then Ukrainians have established a foothold near the vicinity of the Oleshki settlement. Not inside the city, but near the vicinity of it. What I would think this is a special forces raid into the Russian positions to sow panic and chaos into the Russian lines. I don't see heavy armor crossing these newly formed water bodies here, but well-trained infantry with the best equipment, special forces can do a lot of damage to weakened Russian lines around the Oleshki settlement. I'll keep an eye on it for the next report. Now we zoom into the Orehiv axis. Orehiv is right here, but everything happening around it, it's easier to call it the Orehiv axis. Ukrainians have again started an offensive operation here, and as you can see, this yellow area, Ukrainians have overrun Russian positions near Pyatukhatki. This has a funny name, this settlement, Pyatukhatki. I'm definitely saying all of the names wrong. pronouncing the Ukrainian settlements, but it's for your pleasure. So the Ukrainians, by the latest reports, Ukrainians have not liberated this settlement, but they have occupied positions in front of it, paving way for the liberation of it. But the main thing is that offensive operations have resumed after a few days of tactical pause in this area. If we follow the road, it would be logical to assume that if Piatohatki is liberated, next is Sherebianki, following the road to Luhove. The main prize, of course, being Vasilivka, which is a bigger city and a tough nut to crack. Now we go to Donetsk Oblast and zoom into Marinka, where last night and day Russians conducted an offensive operation, striking the Ukrainian defensive positions. This operation failed. Ukrainians held their ground and positions and stopped the Russian advance cold. Russian armor knocked out and Russian infantry took casualties. Now we once again go to the south, to Vuhledar axis. As you can see, I'm following already 5 to 6 different axes. Ukraine has continued offensive operations on almost throughout the entire front, probing for weaknesses in the Russian positions. Vuhledar axis, there's this element called Mikilske and Volodymyrivka. Latest reports, which this map doesn't show yet, is that Ukrainians advanced southeast from Vuhledar towards Mikilske 1 kilometer, occupying positions right in front of Mikilske, not yet liberating the settlement, but it wouldn't be far off. But what we can assume is this is the next goal, the liberation of Mikilske. Also, Ukrainian infantry with armor conducted an offensive operation towards Volodymyrivka. South from these fields, they strike Russian positions in front of Volodymyrivka. Another southern axis that Ukraine is probing is near Huliapolye. Right here, we'll zoom into it. As I reported in the previous video, there was heavy Ukrainian artillery bombardment and this night. And now we got reports from Russian channels that Ukraine conducted an offensive operation with armor and infantry towards Torozhianka, right here, and Marfapil, and Ukrainians overrun Russian positions in front of Torozhianka, not liberating the settlement yet. But the important point is that offensive operations, as I said before, are continuing. And now we go to the most interesting axis and to the location of the most successful Ukrainian probing offensive, Velika Novosilka. There are no changes on the front lines, but there is positional battles going on for the defenses of Makarivka. Ukraine holds the settlement. Russians are probing the defenses of this settlement. Previous Russian counterattack failed. Yesterday, an article came out analyzing the entire Ukrainian offensive of Velika Novosilka, giving us the details of what really happened. And Ukraine took some pretty heavy losses on this axis. I'll summarize that article very shortly for you. So what happened? It started with the 37th Infantry Brigade of Ukraine starting to move towards Neskuchne, and they were supported by French light tanks AMX-10s. Immediately after crossing into the grey zone, they were attacked. They were struck with Russian mortars from 3 sides, from the front and from 2 of the sides, because they penetrated through the first Russian lines and they were vulnerable on 3 sides. That is where the offense stopped and stalled. For 1.5 hours they were pounded by the artillery and they did not move. They just took cover and waited out the mortar bombardment. There were heavy casualties and amongst the vehicles and personnel. For some reason, Ukrainian artillery did not answer. Only 1.5 hours later, where Russians exhausted all of their ammunition, the 37th Brigade continued their movements and then Ukrainian artillery also opened fire. But the casualties were already taken. Forcing the Russian trenches, more losses were taken, but finally they managed to break through and liberate all of the settlements we have talked about already. Most of the casualties happened during the first hours of the offensive. Also, Bradleys were used and they took some heavy damage during the Russian bombardment. Here we see one of those Bradleys because Ukrainians managed to recapture those destroyed or damaged Bradleys. And the information surfaced that by the time Russians knocked out these Bradleys and by the time their infantry advanced to them to inspect them, Ukrainian crews had already left because they survived, because the Bradleys are designed like that. And Russians were really surprised because the engines were still running. That means Russians damaged the vehicles, but they didn't destroy them. The vehicles withstood the bombardment, saving the crews, and they were in working condition after the bombardment. Ukrainians pushed on and recovered all of those damaged Bradleys. One of those you can see in this photo, which will be used for spare parts, and some of them will be repaired. What you see now are newer photos of Ukrainian armor being sent to the location. We also got information that Russia was sending reserves to the area, but now we know what kind of reserves were there. They were the most capable Russian fighting brigades with battle experience, the best they have. You can say Russia has their best fighting force in the Velika Novosilka axis to bolster the front and in the Bakhmut axis. Everything else is manned with weaker forces. As I said, the offensive operations have resumed, and now we got this video of Ukrainians using their mine-clearing vehicles. They're mine-clearing explosives, and this video is filmed from a hill, and you can beautifully see how the explosive flies, detonates on the ground, and you can see the shock wave. It is an astounding explosion, probably exploding the explosive and the mines with it. I don't think an explosive that big leaves any mines intact. And when this vehicle is used, of course, infantry and armor will follow, so this is a video from an ongoing offensive operation happening right now. In this video we can see a robot remote mining vehicle laying anti-tank mines. It is used by the 28th Brigade. With one day this vehicle can make an entire area untraversable for Russian armor, and with no risk to Ukrainian lives because it's done by a robot. Usually anti-tank mines are laid well before enemy armor reach the area, but in some situations on the front line you have to mine under fire, and this is where this robot is very useful. Good news come from the Ramstein meeting. The F-16 coalition has been made. Denmark and Netherlands will provide training to the Ukrainian pilots on the F-16, and both of these countries will also transfer F-16s to Ukraine. The harsh reality is possibly we won't see F-16s physically in Ukraine before the end of this 2023. If things evolve extremely fast and successfully, then perhaps 1 to 2 months before the end, November, December, but I would predict January, February 2024. But it's more a political message that the West will support Ukraine with more modern weaponry until Russia pulls out of Ukraine. This is International Atomic Energy Agency General Director Rafael Grossi, and he was allowed with his team to enter the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. Why is this important? Well, with the destruction of Novakhovka Dam, the power plant doesn't get cooling water from the Novakhovka reservoir anymore because there is no water. This puts the reactor in big risk of overheating. This is the biggest nuclear power plant in the European area, and if anything would happen to it, 1 billion people could feel the effect. The fact that this team is inside that power plant gives me a little bit of an ease, because I know Russia wouldn't plan any false flag operations in the plant where an international team is in. They will check the situation, assess it, and take necessary precautions to keep a nuclear meltdown from happening. What is a true Ukrainian update without Prigozhin? I know you guys miss him. How about a little drama between Wagner and the Russian Minister of Defense? Yeah? You want it? Get your popcorn. When World War I was going on in 1912 to 1914, which is actually a similar story to what we have today. The Tsar's daughters worked as Sisters of Mercy at the time. They may not have worked much, but at least they did something. What does the Minister of Defense daughter do today? She walks around, wiggles her butt, wears lipstick and makes her press lunches. That's why we have sloppiness going on. So Prigozhin is straightly attacking Shoigu's children. A few videos ago I reacted to Prigozhin's children, and they are exactly the same. I mean, what Prigozhin is describing right now, his own children are much worse, but it's fun to watch this drama going bigger and bigger. I mean, if you go against a man's children, that is very personal. Prigozhin keeps us entertained and he keeps the drama up. Let's be honest, he is a Russian oligarch, and Shoigu is a Minister of Defense, but he behaves like an oligarch. They both have oligarch children, which is one of the worst things to come out of Russia at all. Horrible personalities. And it's like that Spider-Man meme when they both blame each other, you know, with the fingers. Exactly like it. My friends, if you want to wear a shirt with an incredibly cool design that shows that you support Ukraine, like this, with love from Ukraine, with a drone dropping ammunition on a Russian tank, or this Ukrainian trident dad hat, then stoneandsoldier.com is in the description below. Pick a design for you and your grandmother. I'm sure she'll love it. This dad hat, for example, has a rustic style to it. It comes out of a factory with these tears. I've gotten some feedback that, oh, my hat is broken, it's torn up. That is the style of it. It comes out new as it is worn. A cool, worn out look to it. My friends, if you think I pronounce Ukrainian settlements weird, you wait until you hear today's Patreons. I'll butcher the hell out of those names. Grzegorz Brzezinciewicz. Gregors Brzezic, what the hell? Who are you? Why do you exist? Why do you have such a name? Blazej Talarovski. Daniel Rickards. Oh, an easy one. Advent Ruin. Yakaya. Thank you to these 5 people for making my life easier. If you like the channel, Patreon link is in the description below. Also, 3 times a day you get frontline updates on my Twitter account, link is in the description below. As well as Instagram, where I post photos of my future plans. I have something big coming up which I cannot talk about here yet. You'll see it in my Instagram. Until my next video, my friends. Slava Ukraini.